Great, Jared, WRD consultant, working with the Chicago Department of Environment. And just want to start off by saying welcome. Thank you guys all for showing up. Hopefully this will be a beneficial workshop that you guys can then transcend to some of the people you know, some of the community members you know. So why don't I'll introduce my colleague, Dan Swick right here. He's a project coordinator with WRD Environmental, and he's actually the expert on sustainable backyards. So he's the one that's going to start talking to all of us. Well, thank you all for joining us. I'm going to hand it over to Dan. Like I said, he's the expert on this. So Dan, why don't you go ahead? The floor is yours.
Thanks, Jerry. And thanks, everybody, for coming. I recognize about half the room, which is awesome. Some of you from past workshops, some from different other work that we've done. So thanks, everybody, for coming. This is really very encouraging. Give everybody a quick background on why we're here. A lot of you are probably familiar with the rain barrel program that the city used to run. We sold subsidized barrels by the thousands. We would buy big, huge amounts of upcycled food barrels and sell them out of the back of a truck in parking lots across the city. It was really successful, and we moved a lot of barrels and raised a lot of awareness. But there were a few problems with that program. First was that we priced all of the other potential vendors in the city out of business, and everyone refused to carry barrels, so your only option to get them for a reasonable price was to try to make it to one of the 3 events, and if it wasn't close to you, if it was on a bad day, you were kind of out of luck for the season. Another problem was that we could only get one type at a time. It was big blue barrels, and a lot of people didn't want them because they thought they would be ugly on their homes and didn't want to get involved with that. And then it was just a logistical problem for our very small staff, which is me and one other person, and I wasn't even there yet, so it was just one woman doing all the work, and it was too difficult. And the last problem was that people would just hand a check over, and then they would take a barrel home, and there was no real educational component, and a lot of people were having trouble installing them because they couldn't find instructions. So we tried to think of a way to get more education into the process and to add some more choice to the process. And so we applied for a grant from the US EPA 3 years ago, and we got our first grant from their pollution protection program. And that was how we gave out rebates last year for rain barrels. And then this year, we got a second grant from the US EPA, or from the USDA Forest Service, to offer more rebates for trees and native plants and compost bins. So that's kind of the history of the program. And this year, we wanted, sorry, to back up just a second. Last year, to get a rebate, you had to come to a workshop. And we actually ended up handing out about 1,000 rebates last year at all of our different workshops. We only received 60 back in the mail, which is a really low return rate. So one of our strategies this year was to take down the barriers and let people get rebate forms any way they want. We've been to every single hardware store and garden center that carries rain barrels, trees, native plants, and compost bins this year to educate their staff and to give them materials. We're still doing workshops, and then we have information on our website, and we're trying to get the word out in as many publications as possible. So it's a big change this year, and one of the components that I think is most important is the one that brings me here today. What we did before the growing season started is we took a map of a few different things across the city. We looked at basement flooding risk, where different parts of the city were at risk of having their basements filled with sewage during heavy rains. We looked at urban heat island effects, and then we looked at areas where we had done outreach in the past and areas where we had maybe missed opportunities or where we've had low participation in programs in the past. And so we identified 3 areas to do some more concentrated outreach and to try and get out in the community as much as possible and bring this great resource that the USDA has given us to the communities that can put it best to work and who might benefit the most from these resources. And those communities are the Hegewisch, southeast part of the city, Chicago Lawn and Marquette Park, and the Avondale neighborhood on the northwest side. I was going to print a map out of these, but I didn't have time, otherwise I would show you. But so that's a big part of the reason that we're here. And to give you a really quick overview of kind of what we're hoping to accomplish, first off, again, thanks everybody for coming, and you just being here and taking in this information is a great resource for us, because we know you're all active in your community, and just sitting here talking with you will bring a ton of information out to the people who need to hear it. But we've got a couple other ideas that we'd like to run past you. One of them is that at the end of the season, probably in late September or October, in all three communities, we're working with some nurseries to bring out trucks full of trees. We aren't sure exactly what size they'll be at, but they won't be little whips. They should be a little bit bigger. We'll probably have some whips too, actually. But we'll sell those on a subsidized basis, so they'll already be discounted. Some feedback that we get a lot of places is that the rebate program works for some people. They like the choice, but the problem is waiting for the rebate to come in the mail, which can take several months with the city's financial processes. And believe me, we work every day to try and get that time down and get the response down, but at the end of the day, it's out of our hands. We have to send the stuff over to some room in City Hall, and they take care of it and send the checks on. So we're working to make that more efficient, but we understand that that's a problem. So we will be doing a subsidized tree event at the end of the season, and we really like that to be more than just a sales event. We want to have workshops, and we want it to be about the organizations that are already here, so we can use that resource. Yes?
Have you all sat down with Open Lands and talked about getting the tree keepers? There's about 1,000 certified tree keepers in the city. Have you talked about getting those tree keepers involved in the giveaway so they can, do a planting demo, or they can maybe even go out and help people plant correctly?
Yeah.
Have you talked to Glenda or Jim?
Yep. They have we've given them our information, and we haven't gotten any commitments yet, but that's part of what we would love to do at this workshop, is have some experts on site who can talk about planting, and then even maybe, depending on how many volunteers we can get, we can help people plant their trees in their yards. That would be a best case scenario. So that's a great question, and we would love for that to happen.
Well, we have about, how many is it now, 10 certified tree keepers in our group. So, I think we could help you with that this fall, just
Great.
in this area, because we're basically focused in Southeast Chicago.
Daniel,
Great.
are you bilingual?
Yes, I am.
Oh, see, and we have a bilingual, so that would definitely be an asset.
Oh, great. That's wonderful. And that's, just so everybody knows, we do have all the information in here, I think everything in Spanish as well, so we can provide that for the workshop at the end of the season. And then besides the end of the year event, another thing that we'd really like to focus on this year and kind of get your help with is getting the word about the program and these resources out to local publications and any kind of information dispersal channels that you guys are really familiar with. It's been really great seeing these things pop up in alderman letters, and Alderman Pope's office has been very receptive to this message, and they were actually supposed to send someone here, so somebody must have come up. But
In the Southeast, where's the boundary that you're focusing on at the Grady?
we don't really have a hard boundary, because Hegewisch is so contained by the Calumet area that
Because I'm from Bush, and our volunteers are either from Bush, South Chicago, or East Side, so none of us are technically in your area.
That's fine.
It's not hard for us to come out here and help out, but I'm just wondering, in terms of outreach. As I explained to Jerry, I don't think I could sell this program in my neighborhood. People would just look at me like I was crazy.
Right.
I would love to be able to encourage people to be environmental. We give away seedlings, and we'll continue to do that because that's kind of what we do. You know, all of our tree keepers, I think we have 4 home nurseries now, and we only have like 2 rain barrels amongst the 4 of us. So we could, you know, we've asked DOE to just supply us some more rain barrels. And I currently have 200 gallons of water stored, and only 100 of it is correctly protected with mosquito screening because here we are back on another topic, which is that a rain barrel holds 50 gallons, and a rainstorm doesn't kick out 50 gallons of water, it kicks out 150 gallons of water, because that's what the last one did for each side of my house.
Right. Yeah. So when you get 8 inches of rain,
yeah.
a 50-gallon barrel is not going to do a whole lot.
Yeah. And see, my overflow valves are all set on my parkway trees because I have a very extensive area to work with because I'm also adjacent to a community garden. So I have ways to dump the extra water, but I don't think that people necessarily realize that a rain barrel alone, that you really have to have a rain system. A rain barrel is just one small component in it.
Right.
You know, so if I'm looking at trying to like store 200 gallons of water, that's 4 rain barrels.
Right. So that brings up a really good point that I have missed already, and that's I know that this group is really savvy on all these issues, but just in case, and all these materials in the packet, actually, I've given you a lot of things so that you can hand if you want to. But if you don't, you can give them back to me. You can hand stuff out to your neighbors and friends and coworkers. There's 5 of each of the rebate forms in here, and there's some signs and handouts as well that you can feel free to disperse. But one of the things is this Managing Stormwater at Home package, and there's a really good diagram of how the sewer system works in here. And on the topic of water management and water harvesting, just to kind of give a little background on why these federal agencies decided to give us money to help people install stormwater best management practices is, and I apologize for those of you who have heard this a million times before, but we have a combined sewer system in Chicago, which means that our wastewater and our stormwater all eventually end up in the same pipe. So when we have the big storm events where our sewer systems become overloaded, you can get some of that sewage water up into your basement, right? Overflows into your basement. It's a big health concern, and one of the ways we can address that is by trying to manage stormwater as much as possible on site. And so rain barrels are a way to do that. Trees and native plants are great to help redirect water into the soil. And then compost isn't really a direct factor, but it's a good complement, and compost helps us heal our urban soils to give them better drainage and better for plants. So that's a big part of it. And then also, as I'm sure everyone has heard a million times in the news, we do periodically have to open up the locks to the lake and pour some of that water into the lake. And that's especially for our USDA Forest Service grant. It's part of the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, and they're obviously very interested in helping Chicago keep wastewater out of the lake and protect that precious resource. So that's a little background on that, just so we have that kind of in mind. And then the rain barrel question. Rain barrels are good because you can store the water and you can use it. But from a stormwater perspective, the big benefit for rain barrels is that it makes you disconnect your downspouts from the sewer system. So again, on this diagram you can see the downspouts are going straight into the sewer. So that means that all the water that lands on your roof ends up in your sewer. So that's millions and millions of square feet across the city that are just pouring water straight into the sewer. And if we can disconnect as many of those as possible without causing too great of a disturbance in people's yards, and if we can avoid flooding that way, we can make a real impact. And the problem is that you have these blocks where a couple people on the block are interested in this kind of thing, and they put their rain barrel in and they don't notice any difference. That's because you need the whole street to get together and hit a certain percentage participation before people start seeing real reductions in stormwater. getting into their place.
Is that information that's kind of figured and available so we can let people know? You know, a certain neighborhood needs to have this many in order to be reach an effective one?
So that's a great question, and there's no single answer because the way our sewer works, without getting into too much detail, we have it's called trunk lines, which take they're kind of bigger lines, but they're not the biggest. So they take everything from like a block level or a multi-block level, and they put it into one pipe, and then that pipe goes through some other systems and gets into the deep tunnel or to any of the other bigger pipes. So each of those kind of trunk line directed systems is called a sewer. We call it a sewer shed. So since we don't have real watersheds here anymore because we're so urbanized, we have sewer sheds. So you can look at a geographical area in the city where all the rain that falls, give or take, will end up in the same pipe eventually. And each of those different sewer sheds has kind of different characteristic. Whether there's more impervious surfaces versus pervious surfaces, or whether the pipe is 100 years old versus 50 years old, or whether it's a 20-inch pipe versus an 18-inch pipe. These are all different factors. So thankfully, the Department of Water Management has done a really great bit of modeling where we can see if we get 10% of the street to or 10% of the residents to put in a rain barrel, we know whether or not it'll make a difference. So that's kind of on a block by block level, and it's unfortunately too fine of a detail to really go out and tell people exactly where they need to be. But I think, generally speaking, you can say, we just get as many people as we can, because we're going to have more rain. We're going to have more water to manage in the future. So the more people we get on board now, and the more water we keep on site now, the better off we'll be in 50 years.
A huge number of people in my neighborhood don't even have gutters for their houses.
That's true.
So that's something, I don't know what it's like in Hegewisch or East Side, but Peggy lives in, that's part. I did mention this to Lyndon too when I was doing the C3 training, the same person you're working with.
Yes.
I mentioned to her that, it's, that if there's no gutter, then some of that issue you're describing isn't happening, because it's not getting sent directly into the sewer. If there's no gutters dispersing around the home.
Okay.
So.
Someone's half the battle.
Yeah. So
That's why we're here. We're the local experts, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I have a question. When you said about upcycling those food barrels, what does it cost to make a rain barrel? Because I know at one time Karen had proposed possibly having a make a rain barrel workshop, and if we could upcycle, and I think if people were to actually attend a make a rain barrel workshop, they'd be more inclined to use a rain barrel if they made it, if they took the time to make it. And I just wondered, what is it, do you know? Have you ever done something like that as part of?
We haven't done a make a rain barrel workshop, but
the Illinois Department of Corrections does it. That was my ideal. What they were doing with their 55-gallon drums, where they got a lot of their food products and cleaning products, they were recycling them, which is a laudable thing. But they'd have to put them on trucks and carry them to recycling centers. And they said, here's an idea. Why don't you retrofit them and sell them? And they're doing that, and they cost $25. They're coming from Menard Correctional Center in Southern Illinois. These are not very portable items. No. To rent a truck and ship them up here, it would probably, it's self-defeating, So what it costs them is $2.25 to make the rain barrel, and they're charging $25 for it. So that's quite a pop. That's quite a return on investment. So,
well, I was only asking because at Crowley's Yacht Yard, I've seen big blue plastic barrels, and I don't know if he gets some sort of product in it, and I was thinking maybe he'd donate the barrels. That's why I'm asking. I don't know if
that's exactly what happened in one of these places that are listed on the sheet in Oak Park, Green Home in Oak Park. It was a high school kid named Isaac Sennett, and he received an award from the governor for doing that very thing, going to local food and especially food retail entities and asking, if you're going to recycle that rain barrel, can I just have it and I can retrofit it? So that's a great way to get more low-cost rain barrels in your neighborhood.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I've heard that the Twinkie, what's the little waxy brown chocolate
Tootsie Roll.
Tootsie Roll. The Tootsie Roll factory has those barrels, and they've given them away before. But that's a great idea, and that's something where we could, if we can get donations and that kind of thing going, I'm sure, and I have to check on this with the grantor, but I'm sure we could use some of our resources to buy the
fittings and
the
the,
fittings.
yes.
Yeah, it costs about $2.25.
That's I think another issue for residents in Chicago, especially like in our neighborhoods. Literally, my house and my neighbor's house, we can shake hands through the windows. We're that close. So it's difficult sometimes to know where to place a rain barrel. There's, it's difficult.
Right, and that's something we say at workshops all the time, is that it's not going to be appropriate for everybody. I mean, if you don't have any gutters, you're obviously not going to put a rain barrel in. And if your only downspouts are in the gangway and you don't want to mess with, rerouting your gutters, then you're just not going to put one in.
What about garages? Because most times in the suburbs, people don't have it next to their house because they're very house, proud. But they will put it next to their garage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's where mine is. That's where my neighbor's is. That's where my other neighbor's is. Because it's in the back of the house and it's not so visible from the street. And you can put it on the side of the garage that doesn't face the street. If your downspouts on that side, which mine is.
Do you know that at the cost of the current cost of water is 2 cents, $2 for 1,000 gallons, right? So one rain barrel, I costed it out, is worth about, that contains a 50-gallon drum contains about 10 cents worth of water. Just, in terms of when you're saying you save money, it's a very small amount of water in terms of dollar amount. I mean, we still have really, really cheap water.
Right, we do. And it's not reflected in, because most people don't have meters, so it's not reflected in your billing anyway.
I just went to a meeting.
Did you?
Because I needed a second rain barrel.
But you're also doing other things, like you're protecting the foundation of your house from water damage.
Right.
You're cutting down on the cost of managing stormwater. I mean, look at all the energy that's involved with the management of stormwater.
But see, so we don't have those figures. I mean, I hear that it's expensive, but we don't know how much it really is.
Right.
But then again, some people don't really care about what they're doing with the water. As long as it's not doing something to their house, they could really care that's what they're doing to it.
Right.
Nobody worries about water until it's in their basement.
So I think,
Or if there's none to drink.
Yeah, that too.
I think to give a little bit of a perspective on our mission here, and I guess part of the mission of the grantor that gave us this money is that we're going to change as many minds as we can, but at the end of the day, we have enough resources to reach everybody who already wants to do some kind of management in their yard. And the job of getting people on board who might not already be interested in this kind of stuff is that'll kind of come with adoption later on. We're still, even though it's been years since we started this program, we're kind of still in the early adopter phase. It's still weird and foreign to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to help push the people who are thinking about it, but maybe aren't quite ready yet to get on board, or even just to continue. Maybe they keep a garden, maybe they keep a flower garden, where we can say, hey, have you ever seen a purple coneflower in the spring? They're beautiful. You should replace some of your annuals with a purple coneflower. It'll come back every year and it'll be beautiful, and you won't have to water it. So that's kind of where we are.
So what kind of visuals do you use when you go to convince someone? I mean, if you do a workshop, do you have photos? I'm just, okay.
So sorry, we can go through some of this information right now, but we have these 4 different types of rebate forms for all the 4 BMPs that we're encouraging. And so they're color-coded. Rain barrels are blue, compost bins are brown, trees are green, and then the native plants are like this olive color. And we tried, we don't have a ton of photos of native plants, but we tried to put the most beautiful looking ones on here. So we've got some of the flowers, the purple coneflowers and prairie fire, and some of these really pretty gateway native plants. Because they're nice flowers, but then once you get into the native plants, you might want some grasses and sedges, that kind of thing. And then on the inside here, to hopefully make it a little easier for people, we have this chart that shows the conditions that each plant needs, what kind of water conditions it likes, what kind of sunlight, whether or not it attracts wildlife. Some people like to watch the birds in their yard and native plants.
Butterflies.
The best way to do that. What's that?
Butterflies.
Butterflies, yeah, exactly.
Butterfly gardens are good.
Yeah. And then you've got the species here that you can go to your garden and look for. And these 14 species are some of the most easily available that we've found in the city so far. So that's a good way. And, you know, people, even businesses and stuff, are starting to plant native flowers on their property because it's so much less expensive over time. So a lot of people are now becoming familiar with the purple coneflower, especially. Everybody knows the purple coneflower. Echinacea, right? So that's a good one, a good visual for people to look at.
Have you thought about block clubs? A lot of neighborhoods in Chicago have block clubs.
Yeah.
And here's what I'm thinking. What about a contest between the block clubs? Who could rain barrel up their neighborhood and there's some kind of a prize or something?
Yeah, that's a great idea. And does anyone have, because I would love to reach out to the block clubs.
The Claretians and the New Communities group, they have a coordinator, right, or who addresses block clubs.
Okay.
So that's the person you'd want to get a hold of, Gracie
Okay.
Robolito.
Yeah.
I can
know
maybe
her.
email you or something. I
It
don't
would-
have her contact.
It would be
Yeah,
interesting
I've
to
heard.
see if everybody on a block got a rain barrel, what would
Yeah.
happen during these large rain events? Would there be a difference in the amount of water that they take on in their basements? And so instead of, wagging your finger at somebody's going to actually say, oh my God, if my neighbor does it and I do it and the neighbor next to me does it, we all benefit,
Yeah. Exactly.
And so they become somebody who's experienced the benefits of it, and I think you make a true believer out of somebody that way.
In a major downpour, such as the ones we get, how fast does a rain barrel fill up? Say it was dry to begin with.
Yeah.
Big one hits, as we've had in the last couple, fairly quickly.
Yeah.
How fast does a rain barrel fill up?
It could fill in half an hour.
Half an
Yeah,
hour.
or
Okay.
maybe faster.
Then you've still got then you get overflow, right?
Right. And
Yeah,
then,
have you seen the rain barrel, Kevin?
I've seen them, but it's been a while.
They have a top nozzle and then they have two bottom nozzles, okay? So you hook a hose up to your top nozzle, which is at the top, right? And then mine runs out from my gangway to my parkway. And so the overflow goes directly to my trees.
Is the flow fast enough that you don't get overflow right at the house?
Well, actually, this time I ended up running out and turning on the bottom nozzle and running some of the water out to my to my garden because it wasn't sufficient, But also the bottom, there's two nozzles on the bottom. One of them can link you to a second rain barrel. So ideally, after you calculate your roof area, and I don't know if this guide has it in there when they take you take your square footage, you multiply that times the number of inches, you divide by a number, and you get your gallons, right? Ideally, you set your system up so it has a little bit of capacity, right? And then, okay, here's rain barrel number one that's getting fed from your gutter. As this one's filling, it's also feeding from the bottom to a second one or even a third one, and so all of them are taking water in. Right?
It's called daisy chaining.
Thank
You
you.
daisy chain your rain barrels.
Okay.
In your experience with the two hoses, has that been good enough so far?
So far, yes, but I'm not a very high risk for flooding. I'm just lucky and kind of set up where
But what I mean is you're not getting overflow from the barrel right at the house
I do
because of the
sometimes.
hoses.
I do sometimes, but it's better than when I had my gutter there because
Okay.
I had a TIF roof put in, and the brilliant people who put my TIF roof in told me I had to have a gutter, and they aimed my downspout right at my basement. So the rain barrels, that sort of saved me, and then over the years I've gotten more adept at getting the water to where it needs to be. So,
yeah.
I'm not an expert yet, but I'm trying to be.
And the thing, as long as the ground near your barrel doesn't slope towards your house, it can tolerate quite a bit of water, as long as it's not paved.
Well, right, but I have a pink gangway between my
Oh,
houses,
so yours is on the gangway.
It's in the gangway, it's very near the storm drain, and every now and then I do have seepage issues, so it's still a challenge.
Yeah. So, Another thing that's in your packet is this where to purchase sheet, which shows this is, like I said, we went around to all the garden centers and hardware stores, and unfortunately there really aren't many in Chicago that are close to this area. And I don't know so much about the suburbs, but so that's a challenge. And a creative solution that we can get to again is if we can work with some local builders or local nurseries and get some subsidized sale events out here. If you guys think there's interest, we can do that. When we were out in Chicago Lawn, they were really interested in having some rain barrel truck events where we could bring a truck out to a school and install rain barrels out of the back, or trees or native plants or whatever. So if that's something that anyone here finds interesting, let us know a date and the time, and we can work with the vendor. We have a bunch of vendors that we've worked with in the past, and buy the barrels, and we'll just sell them for 50% off.
I think that might be a good idea around here, because when I've walked around, there's a lot of gardens out here.
Yeah.
And a lot of trees, so people would actually be beneficial from that.
Great.
Is it only Chicago residents?
Yes, it is. Unfortunately.
I mean, I understand why.
Yeah.
There's any-
But we do. I mean, we get calls all the time from suburban municipalities who want to take the idea and make it their own too. And they always ask for advice.
Do you know, I mean, are the suburban sewer water systems under the same pressure or the same issues, or they just
Probably
have-
the older ones. I mean, anything built, I think, after like the 50s is separated, but older systems. I mean, New York City's the same way, and Boston's the same way. All the older systems. And, you know, there are a couple other options, like the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District sells barrels for $50, and that's
And
all.
those are available to non-Chicago residents.
Yes.
There
Yeah.
are lots of correctional facilities that they could.
So I guess just to kind of get back to the some of these materials, just so we make sure we go through all of them. This other sheet here is the frequently asked questions, and these are some things people ask us all the time about how the rebate program works. And I won't go through all of them, but just so you know that that's there if you're talking to somebody about this and they have a question about how long it'll take or any of the rules. And just some of the basics are, you can really buy this stuff anywhere. We just ask that the vegetation be purchased from the state, because that means it was raised in the same conditions that it'll be living in, so it's already hardy to our winters and that kind of thing. And then, if at all possible, try to buy locally and not online, but if you can't find what you're looking for locally, feel free to buy online. One of the things that I really like to tell people is that before we started doing rebates, there were only 3 vendors who were selling rain barrels, and they were really only selling the super high-end like terracotta ones. They're like $200. And now we have over 40 retailers in the city. So it's great. And they only, I mean, some of them only sell 5 or 6 a year, but that's 5 or 6 more than they were selling before. And those are, a lot of them are ones that we didn't even rebate. So it's kind of it's getting legs of its own, which is good. So if we can keep our local businesses happy, that'd be great. So that's that. And then one thing, we'll go through this really quickly. There's this packet here. This is a PowerPoint presentation we put together. And there's an electronic version of this that I'll send everybody via email. So you can have this. But this is kind of our condensed talking points for going over these best management practices with folks. So it goes over rain barrels and kind of our sewer system woes that we went over earlier, trees and native plants, and some really basic, hopefully non-intimidating instructions on that, and then compost towards the back. But let's just go through this really quick so you kind of know what's in here. The first slide is just kind of about the program. Talks about best management practices and how the program works. The second page is the same diagram we just talked about, and there's my colleague Lyndon put together this little paragraph that explains pretty concisely the issues with stormwater and water conservation in Chicago. The next slide is our quick 6-step installation guide for a rain barrel. Some people find it a little intimidating right away because it almost feels like plumbing, that you have to cut this pipe and attach a bendy part to it. But hopefully this like very few step process can take away some of that mystery and intimidation. And then the maintenance slide is last for rain barrels. This has some really basic stuff that most people should know already, but just some tips like don't drink the water. The two most frequent questions we get from everybody are, is it going to smell and am I going to get mosquitoes? Exactly. And the answer is, if you use your water, you won't. And that's kind of what number 2 is on here. Empty your barrel frequently, use the water, you'll be okay. And then in the winter time, as we've already talked about, usually just turn the barrel upside down and leave it in place so it doesn't fill and crack and die. So that's there. And then to address kind of the barrel being next to your house, if you have a site that's not paved, it's great to plant native plants right around your rain barrel, especially flood-tolerant ones. Because as you'll see in the native plant section, they have really deep, complex root systems that are designed to direct water towards the roots quickly. So it's really great to have native plants right around your barrel. And the cool thing about native plants is, we'll talk about that when we get to that. Then we go into trees. Trees are a little more expensive right out of the gate, and they take a little more maintenance, but they're really the Swiss Army knife of best management practices, especially in an urban area. Our city is about, if you looked from above at what's covering the ground, 17% by area of our city is covered with tree canopy, which is great, but we can do better. It used to be, even 15 years ago, it was down near the 10-11% mark. So some of the tree protection stuff that Mayor Daley did and some of the plantings did actually help our tree canopy expand.
How does that compare to New York? I'm just curious.
I think New York's in like the 25%.
So that,
yeah. And if you go, out to like the Northwest and like Seattle, I think they're like 35-ish %. They just, it's a different environment completely.
different ecosystem.
Before settlement, Illinois was 35% forested if you count Savannah as forest.
Yeah.
That was something Peggy found out for us a few years back, and we were curious.
Yeah.
None of the experts found that information for us, because we were asking all the forestry people to take a look at that.
Yeah, because we happen to have an old poster in the office.
Oh, yeah. There's some really wonderful survey information from pre-settlement Illinois. And even some of the historical soil information from here is just wonderful. Unfortunately, that doesn't really hold up in Chicago because we're almost completely swamped and had almost no trees here. But we're not swamped anymore. We have completely different man-made soils now, and trees are appropriate here. And we're probably never going to become a prairie or swamp again, so we might as well put in some trees. So trees are great because they reduce air pollution. Their leaves actually absorb some of the pollution in the air. They help manage stormwater. They actually slow the flow of water down as the rain hits their leaves and slowly trickles off into the ground. And then their extensive root systems, again, help retain water. They take a lot of water out of the soil to make room for more by sucking it up and evapotranspirating it into the air, which has the side benefit of helping cool our neighborhoods. Actually, one thing I forgot to mention is we looked at urban heat island when we were deciding which neighborhoods to go into because trees are so good at that. And Hegewisch is not a concern today because this area has more trees than anywhere else in the city except for the far northwest when you look at the map. And there isn't really a heat island issue, but still we might as well make it cooler here during the summers if we can. And a tree properly sited can help reduce cooling costs in the summertime, keep our homes cooler. And again, if they're properly sited, they can act as a windbreak in the winter and help keep wind off of your home. They also have been proven to increase human health. There's a really interesting study that shows that for kids in school, kids who learn in a classroom that has no vegetation outside the window don't learn as well as kids that do. So just the sight of vegetation helps us as human beings live healthier lives. So there's a benefit there. And they actually increase property value too. So if someone's looking to buy a new home and they see a house equal to another one, and one's on a tree-lined street and one's on a barren street, the one on the tree-lined street is worth more money. So that's another reason to have neighbors, everybody get involved and plant trees. So those are just some of the benefits. They also help increase biodiversity, and they give habitat to birds and insects and other wildlife in the city. So they really are the Swiss Army knife of best management practices. Here's just some basic information about planting. Obviously, when it comes to living things, one guide isn't going to fit for everything. So when people purchase trees, they should talk to the experts at the garden center or nursery where they are, or look up online the Morton Arboretum. There's great information. The Tree Keeper program is just full of great information on these things. But just some basics about planting here to take note of. How deep to plant the tree. As a general rule of thumb, you really only want to plant the tree as deep as the root ball. Most people dig the hole way too big, and they kill their tree when they plant it that way. But it should be 3 times as wide as the root ball. Because when trees are first planted, the roots go out first, and then they go down. So you want to give them lots of room to go out first. So just basic planting stuff. Maintenance. For the first 5 years of the tree's life, you really want to pay close attention to it. During the hot summer months, they need about an inch of water every week. They should be mulched pretty much continuously. New mulch should be applied before the winter time. Is that right, Zach? Mm-hmm. You should interrupt me if I say anything wrong.
No, you're doing Zach.
Okay, thanks. Zach knows his plants better than anyone I know.
The other issue is to mulch correctly, because
Yes.
we see so many things mulched that are done incorrectly.
Yeah, so that's you should mulch like a saucer, not like a volcano. And our own Bureau of Forestry does it wrong a lot, actually, and we have to call them out on it all the time. But if you go down the street and see a bunch of mulch piled up against the trunks of all the trees, you should call 311 and let them know. But what happens is the bark will rot underneath all that mulch, and the tree will die. So it should be in a saucer, so it should be low towards the trunk of the tree, and then kind of a little berm around the outside, ideally to the drip line of the canopy, so that can help collect the water. But if you can't do that, just don't volcano mulch it. And the mulch helps keep moisture in the soil during summer when it's hot, and it helps keep the tree warm during winter when it's cold.
What you're saying is dramatically demonstrated over in Calumet Park, where I guess the Forestry Division has done the last batch of their volcanoes, and John Pastrick and, oh God, what was her name?
Eva?
No.
Who?
Kid, she's in South America.
Jessica.
Oh, Jessica Kanye.
Jessica went out and took a bunch of kids and did it the right way. So you can see some trees in there that are just, you look at them and say, oh yeah, these guys know what they're doing. Then you can move a little bit about a block farther south, and you're in volcano country. You know, and it's like, Cal Park is a nightmare, because for 20 years or so we've been following the tree burners.
Okay.
And they killed off dozens of grand trees out there. And we kept a documentary and used to communicate with the mayor and all sorts of stuff. And he would come up with some off-the-wall recommendation, well, like, you go do it. And I said, no, I've got a job already. But, you know, you should have people who are out there putting up signs or doing something to fix the trees.
Yeah.
And they would just keep burning. It seems to have diminished lately, and I don't know if they've gotten smarter or what's happened, but I don't see as much burning down. But major trees. The Times of Northwest Indiana, when I was working for it, came out and did a survey, and 85% of the trees were damaged by coal at that time in Calumet Park.
So is that a recreational?
Yes.
So people are out there?
Yeah, they're out there, and they're getting shade from the tree, and their thanks to the tree is to dump the coals on it at the end, because I guess they figure if they do anything else with it, somebody's going to walk over it.
Yeah, exactly.
In their bare feet or something like that.
You're kind of putting it off to the side, nobody's going to step
Well, you know,
on
for
it.
about 2 or 3 years, John and some of his friends that do stewardship, they went around and put signs on all the trees.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
No coals on my roots. It was just a sign, no coals on my roots. And they would talk to the people that were having cookouts.
Okay.
explaining why they were doing this.
It's a very popular activity. Just go to any Chicago Park District park hotel.
Right.
And
Yeah.
unfortunately, people they're trying to be good stewards by not burning down the park.
Right.
But what they're doing is they're dumping the hot coals on the and we have this in the state parks as well.
Yeah.
You know, they dump it at the bottom of the tree, and you're like, oh, well, now you killed the tree. You know, so yeah, there is some public education about that.
A lot.
Okay.
Because they're not doing it out of vandalism,
They're not doing it maliciously.
Right.
but out of ignorance.
Some other things just about trees to note is it might not happen right away, but you can actually call 311 and request trees to be planted on your parkway. And they'll eventually make it out and plant more trees. So if you want some on your street, and you don't want to have to buy it, you can contact, just call 311 and request a tree to be planted on your street. And maybe that's another creative idea we can get into. So if you guys hear about like a block full of people who are really interested in getting trees, but there's one barrier or another, maybe we can get creative and work with forestry. I can't make any promises because I can't speak for forestry, but these can have forestry. I can't promise.
Hegewisch, we did ask about that. Well, are you just considering Hegewisch, the boundaries of Hegewisch?
No.
Is there any way you could just include just the 10th ward?
Yeah, that's
Because
a
then
great
you
idea.
would get South Chicago, you would get East Side, you would get South Deering, and that's where all these people are from. If we could just get the 10th ward,
Yeah,
what do you think?
and that's a great idea. And just to be clear,
Hegewisch can be your center, you know.
just to be
no
clear,
problem.
it's
But
it's not, the idea isn't just to get all the resources into one neighborhood. It's just to kind of try and centralize some of our efforts so that we can be more strategic about our
And they're
outreach.
coming into an area that is used to working together anyway.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
as far we won't have to build a network. It's
no,
already here.
It's here.
And that's
Great.
one of the reasons that we chose to have this roundtable here, especially because of CSI has a mechanism to help filter information
And
to
the
the
alderman
rest
of the
of
10th
areas.
ward is on board
Those are
with
right
this?
They were supposed to have a representative here,
So-
but they are aware of it. And Claretian,
Yeah.
Dan has
And
lots
that's
of
our
contacts
Chicago,
with
that's not
Claretian,
Hegewisch.
so he's going to be
Right.
pursuing
Yeah,
it.
so I would suggest go with 10th ward.
It's a great idea.
Better call him.
Yes, sorry.
So everything I focus my energy on is educating young people in hopes that we don't have to have this many meetings in the future like this, because they'll just be educated and know what to do and
Right.
have that as part of a regular knowledge base. Has there been any outreach to the high schools, environmental clubs, or groups looking to do? I know they have community service learning hours that they would fill.
Right.
Could they be retrofitting some of the things that we get donated? Can they be looking and seeking out the donations of the barrels? Or can they serve as a place to have the rain barrels exhibited in a way that local people could come and see this is how you put them together?
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
We're happy to even donate barrels to schools so they can use it as part of their education, especially if they have a garden there. We do a lot of outreach through the C3, the Chicago Conservation Corps Schools Network. We have yet to find a really efficient way to get through to the rest of CPS, but we do have a really direct connection to the C3 schools. So yes, we're doing some, but we could always use more help.
There's a gal that I work with, her name is Cassie Hatsfield, and she is in charge of the
Kimmy?
It's not Kimby, it's the county's high school. There's a little bit of a change going on since it used to be the Preserve Keepers Corps, and now I think it's going to be called Preserve Keeper Corps Teens or something like that. But she works with a lot of high schools, and she is really just kind of a rock star as far
Yeah,
as
she is.
networking people.
I had her as a
And,
boss.
yeah, she's a great gal, and she's in the couple of years she's been with the county has really reached out to a lot of CPS high schools. So,
Okay.
She's speaking to
Thank you.
I'll make sure, definitely, her and myself and another gal are on kind of an outreach team, so I'll make sure to share this information with her.
And C3 has taken a lot of our materials and made them more teacher-friendly.
Okay.
Since I don't know how to do that.
Sure, sure.
And so that's available
Okay.
too. Yeah.
I have a question about tree planting, only
Yeah.
because I'm sitting here. Is there a limit to how wide a parkway has to be or can be? Because I've seen parkways as narrow as this recently. And so if the city's implementing that kind of a design, is it sufficient to plant a tree in?
I think it would depend on the tree species. Do you know anything about that, Zach?
I mean, it's just limited growth. In the size
Oh,
of the
but
tree.
it doesn't matter then?
I mean, I've seen in Rogers Park they have 20, 25 inch DBH in maybe like a 5 square foot growing spot. And they get pretty big, but they'll die quicker and they'll be stunted.
Yeah.
They'll
Because the
probably
city does that a
fall over
lot
little
now.
bit
I notice
quicker.
these very narrow parkways that, you know, in front of my house I have a nice wide one, and other places they got these, because I'm thinking, why bother putting one if it's going to be that narrow?
That would be a good chance to try some other species.
Better. It's not just about how big the tree gets, but also what it's used to.
When it's tolerant.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So,
I'm just asking because if it wasn't sufficient or isn't good for a tree, then the city needs to change their plans about how they build these little parkways, because it's in newer areas where, you know, they've redone sidewalks and they changed the whole configuration.
I would like to see less cement.
I've seen some.
I
Cement
know,
costs money.
I know. So bigger parkways, less.
There's a bunch of trees on my street, like big oaks that have, like you said, 25-inch DBH, and they're like spilling onto the sidewalk where you have like actually part of the tree is grown over. It's kind of sad, but I mean, they're surviving, I guess.
And are they running under the sidewalk, and is there a yard on the other side? Like
Yeah.
if that tree has run under the sidewalk and its roots are then in your lawn, and it's got a nice area to tap into,
Yeah.
they can be amazingly
And it gets some tiles too, you know, and
Pick up the
gets all
sidewalks
the
and
nutrients out of the.
Bring it up.
So one thing, a really great visual for people, in the tree rebate form, we have this little visual that shows, so we have 14 trees that we kind of recommend for Chicago homes, and they all have different kinds of interests. But this chart shows kind of their general shape and size. So that's a really good guide. There's some small ones. I mean, even some that are like the black hog viburnum is kind of more of a shrub, but it can get fairly tall given some space.
Let's look at this.
Even like a red bud is a very small tree. And if you need to get under some power lines, you're obviously not going to plant a huge oak tree or something. You're going to try to plant something smaller so it doesn't get into your power lines and destroy them later on. But this is a good kind of visual to show. These are all trees that have been proven to be very urban tolerant. So this is a good guide. And again, we have some little indicators of what kind of sun they like, whether or not they attract some biodiversity to your yard. That's a really great visual. And to kind of just finish off this guide. Yeah, go ahead.
It's kind of hard because we got a lot of slag in the Hegewisch area. I don't see soil conditions, but I guess something can be arranged by it.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you know any slag tolerant trees here?
Really? We got, a lot of it.
Pretty much all of that Wolf Lake Parkway is slag, and all those trees grow right
Yeah,
on it.
those are growing good,
And
yeah.
it's mostly cottonwood and willow that's on there, and it's
Everything-
falling down quite often right now.
Everything
but
from Avenue
all
O
these will grow in
east,
4 inches.
all that area, all those homes are all back in there, M, N, L, all the way, K, that's all slag back in there. It's everything from 1 foot to 8 foot.
Trees
But
are
yeah.
remarkably tough.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
they do. No,
If you weren't to give me these, how would I tell people to get it?
They're available on the website, which is on the bottom of here. It's cityofchicago.org/rainbarrel.
We have 3 trees.
If somebody can't get to the website, there should be copies at all the hardware stores and garden centers throughout the city. And if they go and bug the garden center, the garden center will hopefully start paying better attention. But the website, they're available. You can download them right off the website.
And they need to make use of it in the Chicago residents.
Just really quickly, there is some stuff on native plants in here. So take note of that. Again, more really basic stuff, and most of it is in the rebate form as well. And on the subject of native plants, we include this invasive plant guide in the packet. So this gives some native alternatives to invasives that are commonly sold or used in landscaping in the city. So something useful to have. So that's there. It is 4:30, so if people have to leave, that's fine, but we'll be here. And please, if you didn't sign up on the sign-in sheet, please do so.